Welcome to the ACT branch of the AIIA. My name is Heath McMichael and I'm branch president. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet and pay my respects to elders past and present. Tonight is not the first time, in fact, that we're focused on tensions in the Middle East, but it is certainly high time that we return to the region. As you will recall, in late 2018, the Australian government announced it would recognise Israeli sovereignty over West Jerusalem as a step towards a two-state solution. However, in October this year, the policy was reversed and Foreign Minister Penny Wong reaffirmed Australia's position that the status of Jerusalem should be resolved as part of a peace negotiation between Israel and Palestine. And so with the signing of the Abraham Accords in 2020 and recent elections in Israel, evidence of divisions within the Palestinian leadership, we might ask the question, does the Israeli-Palestine issue still deserve its place at the centre stage in the Middle East? Well, to throw some light on these questions, these intricate questions, we're honoured that three highly experienced diplomats from the region, the ambassadors of the Republic of Egypt and the state of Kuwait and the head of the General Delegation of Palestine in Australia, could join us. As to the format for tonight's meeting, I'll introduce each speaker in turn and ask them to speak for around 10 minutes. And then we will take questions from participants in-house and from those online using the Q&A function. We aim to finish at 7 p.m. So to let me begin, our first presenter this evening is a regular attender at our events, the head of the General Delegation of Palestine in Australia, Mr Izzat Abdulhadi. Izzat has occupied his current role since 2006, and he is General Secretary of the Council of Arab Ambassadors in Canberra. Before coming to Australia, Izzat founded the Bassam Centre for Research and Development, a leading NGO strengthening civil society in Palestine, and helped establish the Palestinian NGO network and Arab NGO networks for development. So, Izzat, please, if you could begin.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much, Chief, for organizing this panel. I think it's timely, especially after what you mentioned, the new position. It's not a new position, I think. It's just, I mean, back to bypass is a position of considering Jerusalem as one of the final status issues. So reverse the recognition of West Jerusalem as capital of Israel. Of course, this is not, I mean, all the story, but it's also reaffirmed position of Australia to support the two-state solution, negotiated two-state solution between the two parties, Palestine and Israel. Actually, as my presentation will include three parts. It will not include a historical context, although I think it's very important. It's deeply connected to and linked to the current situation. But I will mention one aspect of this historical perspective, which I mean can also provide food for analysis, such as in 1948, as an example, we have two stories with Israel. We have two conflicting narratives. So Israelis, for them, this is right to return. They return back their own homeland. For us, I mean, Israel is a colonial project and was facilitated by the British mandate, actually, to establish a state in this Arab area in the Middle East. So this context is important. Why? Because this is different type of colonization in Israel. So they believe that they are the indigenous people and they believe that we are colonizers. So it's very important background to understand the complex and difficulty between us and the Israelis here. Maybe some academics will propose another approach, which is what we call it fair approach, in which both of us were in this lab. But this needs a sort of reconciliation process and Israel to end its occupation and support what is called now two-state solution. So I start by some political context. You know, I mean, we signed agreement with Israel in 1993. And at that time, there was a lot of optimism that we solve this problem between us and the Israelis. So we started sort of called peace process. And actually, both public were very supportive to the Oslo Agreement and the notion of two-state solution, which is division of two-state solution. I can recall that at that time, more than 65% of the Palestinian public supported two-state solution, which was actually recognized by our own leader Yasser Arafat in 1988, which called the Palestinian Peace Initiative at that time, in which we recognized the Security Council 242 and 338. The two resolutions were the base for what's called peace process in the Middle East. So we signed this agreement with Israel, and as I mentioned, was a lot of optimism at that time, even with the Israeli public, who support the two-state solution. So unfortunately, this notion of two-state solution has been faded and actually failed. And I want just to shed the light and talk a little bit about the reasons behind this failure of achieving effective two-state solution. Israel and Palestine coexist together, live in peace in this holy land. And actually, I want to say that when Palestinians agreed to the two-state solution, which is, I mean, the establishment of Palestinian state in only 22% of history of Palestine. So this was a big compromise from the Palestinian people. Unfortunately, we are asked all the time by the Israelis to compromise the compromise. So, which is still the occupied territories in 1967, 22% of history of Palestine, disputed areas, or even very recently, Israelis said that it's a part of Israel. So it's moving from occupied to disputed to a part of Israel. They call it Judea and Samaria. So for them, this is a part of Israel now. And with the current development in this government, which includes actually a very far right wing, Ben Gvir, 14 seats, who just, I mean, his own program is actually to transfer Palestinians from the indigenous Palestinian in Israel itself, because we have very vibrant community there, 21%, 2 million Palestinians in Israel itself. So as Friedman from New York Times said, that this is not Israel that we know. So Israel is changing to religious Zionism. I mean, Ben Gurion, when he established Israel, he was a socialist, I mean, a secularist, Marxist even. So it was secular Zionism to national Zionism, now to religious Zionism. So there is huge changes within the internal Israeli spectrum. And actually, it's a lot of academics in Israel and even, you know, activists, civil society activists have huge concerns of what's happening in Israel. I think first priority now is not Israel-Palestine conflict within the Israeli public. It's actually the Israeli identity. So there is a lot of discussion about this identity. Where is Israel heading? And of course, this has an impact on Israel-Palestine conflict and on us in our own self-determination. Anyhow, I think UN, EU, United Nations, tens of resolutions, and even, I mean, leaders' views that the main obstacle in front of the peace process and the main reason why the bilateral negotiations between us and Israelis, which continued for more than 29 years, failed because of the Israeli settlements enterprise. So this means that Israeli transfer moved its own people to the occupied territories, which is the 22%, as I mentioned. For the time being, we have more than 650,000 settlers in Palestine. It's a big community now, you know, and this is a violation of international law, violation of the Geneva Convention, which prohibits actually moving the population from the occupying land to the occupied. So it's obvious settlements illegal by international law, and it's the main obstacle in the front of establishing a viable, sovereign, continuous Palestinian state. So the prolonged occupation, the long-term occupation is a big problem now for us. Even now, when we submitted a request to the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, just to give us a sort of advisory opinion that the occupied territories, the 22%, 1967 borders, territories, is occupied the representative of Israel in the United Nations said that, what is this? I mean, this is immoral. And thus we are asking for an opinion that it's, the occupation is illegal. The prolonged occupation is illegal and it should be end. Unfortunately, he said that, no, I mean, they accused us that we are colonizer and this is our own land, this is our own home. This is what he said. And I think, ironically, we can say, okay, let's have his own statement and send it to the ICJ. I think this is very good proof about their own views about the prolonged occupation and about, you know, their own colonial approach to Palestine. Anyway, I think these settlements is really a big issue in Palestine. Just I want to see you, how is our own land has been stolen. If you can look to this map, this was all the Palestine at 1918. So you see this is all Palestinian land, and these are spots are some the Jewish, you know, groups and citizens here in this map. And then you can see here is the this is the Partition Resolution 1947. So also you can see that we have the majority of the land, even with the Partition Resolution 1947. And this is 1967, in which this is Palestine only in blue, and all this becomes like Israel. Why? Because after 1948, Israel also occupied the rest, more land from Palestine, not strict itself to the partition resolution. And look to the last map now. This is Palestine, which you can find a lot of black spots, these are the settlements. So this gives you an idea about the plight of Palestinians and how we lost our land through less than actually 74 years, which we call it the Nakba in 1947. And this is the West Bank. This is what should be the Palestinian state. And you can see also this is the blue is the Israeli control area, which called Area C. It's 64% of the Palestinian land. And also you have these spot, the settlements surrounding the Palestinian communities, which is in green. So this is the situation now, which will prevent for sure the establishment of vibrant, continuous, viable Palestinian state. So settlements is the main problem. But this is not the only issue why the bilateral negotiation between us and Israel failed. The negotiation agenda between us and Israel, including 5 issues, which is, we call it final status issues, according to Oslo Agreement. And this is what's mentioned also by Penny Wong, Senator Penny Wong, when she mentioned that Jerusalem is a final status issue, and she wants just, to go back to the bipartisan agreement that all Jerusalem, it's not West and East, is final status issues, and it should be resolved through bilateral negotiations between the two parties. So first one is Jerusalem. Jerusalem is very important for Christians and Muslims in the world. It's very important for 1.7 million Muslims in the world. Jerusalem is the beginning of story and end of story. We will not find any kind of solution between us Israelis without solving the problem of Jerusalem. So what is the position of Israel on Jerusalem? In 1980, they annexed Jerusalem, East Jerusalem, which is an integral part of the occupied territories 1967. So East Jerusalem was not a part of Israel when it established in 1948. So it was an integral part of the occupied territories 1967. So it's like Ramallah, it's like Nablus, it's like any other city in West Bank. So they annexed Jerusalem in 1980, illegal. This annexation was illegal and considered illegal by United States, by United Nations, by EU, by all other groups in the world, actually. And because of that, they boycotted the ceremony of unifying Jerusalem. Nobody, accept the Israeli invitation to go and celebrate the unification of East and West Jerusalem. And and of course, to Security Council resolution, not only General Assembly resolutions, which they said that the annexation of East Jerusalem is null and void, so has not had any legal impact. So Israel, unfortunately, the position insisted that Israel, unified Jerusalem is the eternal and permanent capital of Israel, no other solution. So when we, for the last 29 years, when we negotiated with Israel about Jerusalem, our position was very flexible. Say, okay, we accept 2 capitals for 2 states. We accept also 1 capital for 2 states. And we accept Jerusalem as international city. So this is our own position, which is really aims to promote the bilateral negotiations between us and Israel and to solve the problem, because peace is the best interest of Palestinian people. Second issue is refugees. In 1948, more than 800,000 Palestinians expelled from their own homeland to neighboring countries. And those at that, and their own descendants now is more than 7 million Palestinians in outside Palestine. So right to return also was one of the final status issues. And the position of Israel about the Palestinian refugees that they don't have a clue of it is the responsibilities of the Arab world. Actually, it's according to the United Nations Resolution 194, which includes right to return of Palestinian refugees and compensation. So there is a sort of legal reference and international law reference for the right to return of the refugees. In spite of our own right of the Palestinian refugees to return back, we also do some compromises also to promote the bilateral negotiation with Israel and reach a peace agreement. In the Arab Peace Initiative, which is, approved by all Arab countries in 2002, it said find an acceptable and just solution to the Palestinian refugees based on the United Nations Resolution 194. So said it's negotiable. It's one of the final status issues. Our own program 1988 said it's non-negotiable right, but now just also to facilitate the negotiation with Israel, we accept that it's one of the final status issues and we should discuss it. But the position of Israel said no, at all. They are not recognized this right for Palestinians. Although every Jew in the world have a right to return to Israel when he wants to return to Israel. But it's our own people who still there have keys in their own houses. If you go to any Palestinian outside Palestine now, as a refugee, you can see his own key in his own house. So this is the, and it's still, 74 years old. Israel built its legitimacy that they were in Palestine, established 2 kingdoms, but 4,000 or 5,000 years ago. And now these Palestinian refugees just left their own land in 74 years, and they don't have right to return back. So this is one of the also pending issue, difficult issue to solve between us and the Israelis. And the third final status issues is security, which is Israel all the time talk about it, that they want to guarantee their security. What was our position? What is our position toward security of Israel? We want to guarantee Israel's security. We accept that, yes, if they don't feel that they are not secure, we need to respond to that. So our own proposal was demilitarized country. We don't want, weapons, we don't want army in Palestine. We accept this. This is, a declared policy of us. We want to concentrate on education, health, development sectors. So this is another compromise from Palestine. Also, we propose to have an international force led by United States on the borders of Israel, 600 kilometers long. We ask, maybe the only country which asked NATO or United States to lead peacekeeping forces to come, along the Jordanian lines. So this was also a big compromise from us, they said. And also we agree on other security arrangements with Israel. If we will have like early alarm centers, it's just also to facilitate the negotiations with Israel. Unfortunately for them said, no, it's just our own forces. It's only our own army. We will continue, controlling this area between Palestine and Jordan for 100 years. And it depends on your own performance. So they put for us key performance indicators. If we are good, if we rise, if we like Canada people, we'll accept, Palestinian state. Actually, this is the Trump terms. because he thought that we should be a liberal country and we should be, within 4 years, he gave us an ultimatum that we should be like civilized people for 4 years, like Canada people, you know. So this is also our proposal for security and borders, which is very important issue. I mean, all the international law, international legitimacy talks about 1967 borders, which I mean, supposedly our own Palestinian state should be established. Unfortunately, Israel does not recognize 1967 borders. I mean, they said, it's also one of the final status issues. Okay, we can, I mean, respond to your own security aspects by do what we call it territorial exchange or swap concept, in which we can exchange areas equal in size and quality. I mean, 2% of the West Bank, 3%, whatever, to respond effectively to Israeli security demands. And also, this is rejected. They want more than 60% of Palestine. And this is also Trump plan, which is, I mean, also supported by the Israelis. By the way, we are left now with 8% only of the 22% in Palestine because of the settlement and because of the control of Area C, which is, I mean, 64% of all Palestine, which is under fully control of Israel. So how we can then establish a Palestinian state in 8%? So these are some of the obstacles in front. This is not just a propaganda or try, I mean, to justify our position, but these are facts. These are, I mean, recorded, and these are documented. These are our positions about the negotiation agenda. So our demand is still a Palestinian state coexist peacefully with Israel in 1960 borders. So what are the then solution? Where are we heading from here? If these are the problems between us and the Israelis, unfortunately, we are left with a few solutions. One is to continue supporting two-state solution, but we need to change the approach, not through bilateral negotiations, because this concept of Australia or Canada or United States, or even EU, talking about negotiated two-state solution, it's failed. I mean, we were sitting around the table, we are unoccupied, they are occupiers. So the balance of power for us is for the favor of Israel. So they can impose anything on us. So we need to be strengthened. And because of that, we proposed the Palestinian Peace Initiative, which is to organize a conference with very concrete terms of reference based on international law and United Nations Security Council and United Nations General Assembly. We can't, I mean, just continue this bilateral negotiation with Israel. And it's already failed. So what we need is to have what we call a right-based approach. It's use the tools of international law to achieve the aspiration and self-determination of the Palestinian people. Self-determination is a right by international law. This is not my recommendation. This is the recommendation of Human Rights Watch, Amnesty Watch, Beit Salem Watch, which actually describe Israel as apartheid, which is sometimes, I mean, annoying to many decision leaders, either in Australia or United States or in Europe, because they don't want to recognize that Israel is apartheid. But actually, this is not our own description. This is Carter's description. This is the Israeli leader description. But why? Because they are afraid of the reality of one-state solution. So if the two-state solution failed, we are heading towards one-state solution. Actually, we are heading towards two solutions. One, either an apartheid, which is rejected, and it will be rejected by the Palestinian people. Will not accept, I mean, apartheid in Palestine. Will, I mean, have a lot of resistance towards this to dismantle the apartheid system, which is now 2 laws in the West Bank: settlements, pass-by roads, house demolition, the construction of wall, 10% of our land inside Palestine. And I can, you know, give you a lot of examples about the Israeli gross violation of human rights. So apartheid will not be accepted by Palestinians. The non-Jewish democratic state will not be accepted by the Israeli public. So we stuck here. And the other immoral solution, like ethnic cleansing of Palestinians, or de facto, this means that, I mean, the concept of more annexation of our land, de facto annexation of our land to the Israelis. So actually, these are the scenarios now. If we are now the majority in the Holy Land, we are 7.2 million, 7 million people. They are also 7 million people. We exceed actually 200,000. So the demographic factor is very important. So what Israel's strategic solution to do with the Palestinians inside the Holy Land? Already we have 22 million Palestinians in Israel, the indigenous people, and we have more than 5.4 Palestinians in Gaza Strip and in West Bank. So this is the situation. So because of that, some wise people in Israel support the two-state solution and encourage the Israeli leadership to support the establishment of Palestinian state. Otherwise, we are heading towards one-state solution will not be non-Jewish. And this is what I used to tell the Australian leaders. Because, I mean, Palestinians will raise the flag on the Knesset once, because now we are the majority. And they don't want to annex us because, I mean, we are the majority. And then they don't like one democratic state, one vote, one person. So either we want to support the two-state solution. Also, we agree also in both solutions, one state or two states, but will not accept other solutions. So this is the situation now. What we should do, Australia, what should do? Australia should recognize without further delay the Palestinian state. EU and United States, if they want to save the two-state solution, still we have an window of opportunity. It's narrow, but still we have window of opportunity to recognize state of Palestine immediately. This will save the two-state solution. This will strengthen the negotiation power of Palestinian people, and this will encourage bilateral negotiation if we have, I mean, the same diplomatic footing. So I hope that Australia will have this leadership position. It's an international, good international citizen. It supports fair go. It supports the international law. It supports rules-based order. So, and the most important thing, the establishment of Palestinian self-determination of Palestinian people and establishing an independent Palestinian state is supported by the public. Very recent survey, 2022, more than half of the Australians support the establishment of Palestinian Palestinian state. And the most important thing that in 2018, 2021, the two national conferences of the ALB have a legally binding resolution to recognize the state of Palestine. So I don't know what the Benny Wong is going to do, or Albanese government. Actually, I'm cautious that they will not recognize the state of Palestine, maybe not in this term, but how they will deal with their own grassroots and their own binding resolutions in 2018 and 2021. And I think this is the challenge in front of this government now. And I think our own engagement with this government and the engagement of academics, policymakers, civil society, activists will lead to this end, which is the recognition of state of Palestine. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Izzat, for that update on the Palestinian position. But I think we might try and fit in some comments now from our other two speakers. Our next speaker, in fact, is His Excellency Mr Bassam AlQabandi, who is the ambassador of the state of Kuwait. The ambassador is a relative newcomer to Canberra, having presented his credentials as recently as October. He is a career diplomat with appointments, ambassadorial appointments in Africa and also in Europe. So please.
Mr. Hayed, thank you very much
for
having us today here. And I thank the audience to be attending today here and accepting us. And I hope we will be useful for the attendance and those from there watching us. Ambassador Izzat, I think he didn't give us a chance to say anything more, and we cannot add anything more, but we can add support for Palestine. Position of Kuwait is very clear, and we mentioned that in many through the officials and through the Minister of Foreign Affairs and through those who they are in charge of the Palestinian issue and in Kuwait. I can read a statement that Kuwait's principle and firm position in the only way to lasting and comprehensive peace is the establishment of the independent Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital in accordance with international legitimacy, resolution to the Arab Peace Initiative and the two-state solution. Ambassador Izzat mentioned something about settlement, and I served in Belgium, and I think this practice in Israel was copied by the Belgians, copied by the Indians, and became a method for settlement. And this is a very bad attitude regarding moving people from one place to another place, shifting them. And this is what happened between the Wallon and the Flemish in Belgium. And this is what happened between the Indian and the state of let's say, the Kashmir in India, moving some religion into another area and replacing them with Hindu towards Muslim. And they think this will go and will demolish by the time. This is wrong. This is wrong. No one will forget his roots. And this is what they are doing here in Palestine. Thinking of peace and accepting the others by the Israelis, I don't think they have it in mind. They are buying time, and they think they have the power, and they are using this power, because this power is not going to remain for very long. And if it stays very long, it will demolish by the time. The truth is that this country is stolen by somebody else and used in a bad way. And the numbers that His Excellency is mentioning, from 20% or 22% to 8%, and with this map, sorry to say, it's like cancer. And it's a very bad story, started 100 years ago. And thinking of this will be disappearing after another 50 years or another 100 years, it's not going to change. Situation will remain the same if the two parties covered by the international arena, meaning the United Nations. We have many examples. Minsk group and other groups, they didn't finish any issues. 3 countries, 4 countries negotiating on solving a matter. No, this is not the way. We have to go through the United Nations and respect the law of the United Nations. And I don't want to take too much of your time. It took too much time today. Sorry. So I'll give you the chance to ask and give my colleague to continue. And thank you again.
All right, thanks, Ambassador. So our final speaker tonight is indeed the Ambassador Mahmoud Zayed from the Arab Republic of Egypt to Australia. Ambassador Zayed has been here since December 2019. At diplomatic postings in London, Washington, and Wellington. He's worked in various roles in Cairo in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, including information technology, human resources, and administration. Please.
Thank you very much. Yes, as my colleague, Ambassador AlQabandi, Ambassador Abdulhadi actually covered all aspects of the issue, so I will try to be as brief as possible. Yes, I mean, Egypt regards the Palestinian issue as very central to our foreign policy. We are very committed to resolving the Palestinian issue and seeing a peaceful resolution for the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Egypt actually was the first country to sign a peace treaty with Israel. That was in 1979. And this treaty stood the test of time. It's a successful treaty. There's a state of peace and stability due to that agreement in the area. And that was followed by Jordan. Jordan also signed a peace treaty with Israel. But until this moment, there are issues which are unresolved. And we have the Palestinian issue. We have also Israel's continued occupation of other Arab land in Syria and Lebanon. And I'm glad that this issue is of interest here in Australia. This is a very, it's very important to have stability in the Middle East, and stability will not be achieved without resolving the long-standing conflict between the Israelis and the Palestinians, which is the core of the Arab-Israeli conflict. To have a peaceful resolution is not impossible because we already have peace treaties with countries in the areas, and there's a lot of convergence on views on how should a peaceful settlement look like. So Egypt's position is that we support a two-state solution whereby the Palestinians are accorded with their legitimate, inalienable rights of establishing their own state. And that state should be on the pre-1967 borders. We are now, these days, celebrating the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. That's an international celebration, actually sponsored by the United Nations. And that is we are in the 75th anniversary of the partition plan of Palestine. So the solution on the table now, as Ambassador Abdulhadi mentioned, would give the Palestinian state only 22% of historic Palestine. That is accepted by the Palestinians, to have their own state on 22% of historic Palestine. And that is a position that we support in Egypt, but it has to be a viable state, a contiguous state, and we have to resolve all the relevant issues, such as Jerusalem, such as refugees, in line with the resolution number 194, which was it was a resolution by the United Nations following the 1948, following the establishment of Israel, allowing the refugees to return to their homeland. But as the ambassador mentioned, the Palestinians accepted a compromise whereby the refugees will be a final status issue. So that's a compromise. So as he indicated, you cannot have a compromise of the compromise. It's already, there is already a compromise. So the position of Egypt is that we support the establishment of an independent Palestinian state. So there's a two-state solution, but the Palestinian state has to be viable, contiguous, and on the 1967 borders, with possible agreed swaps to accommodate Israel's security considerations and the facts on the ground. We oppose any unilateral action that would affect the two-state solution, such as the establishment of illegal settlements. These are settlements that are not legal under international law. And the two-state solution is based on international law. It's based on the rights of states to have their the rights of people to have self-determination. Yes, and it's this, as I said, there is a convergence of views on how should a Palestinian-Israeli settlement look like. We need a Palestinian state. This is very similar. I mean, there's a similarity between, let's say, Australia's positions versus New Zealand positions versus the European Union position. So, for instance, the United States also has a position which is a little bit different, but not completely divergent with the terms that the international community accept. The two-state solution within recognized borders, with two countries living together side by side in peace and security. And we have to think about also the opportunities for Israel from ending this conflict. Now, if this conflict is resolved and Israel is no longer an occupying power of the Palestinian people, this will help Israel become integrated into its region. in the Middle East. So Israel will be thought of as a hub for innovation, an economic success story, research and development, and so on. So this is going to be the perception about Israel, not about an occupying country denying other people their rights. You cannot accept occupation in the 21st century. We are in 2022, the age of human rights. How can we as an international community accept this? There has to be a resolution. As the ambassador indicated, if unilateral action, particularly settlements on the ground, make the two-state solution impossible, then the only plausible alternative would be a one-state solution, which will never be accepted by Israel. So the more they build settlements, the more the two-state solution becomes very difficult to achieve, if not impossible, because it will not be a viable, it will not be a contiguous state. And then they will be stuck with only a one-state solution, which is something that I'm sure that they don't want. So there is, unfortunately, a rise in the extreme right in Israel, and that is a problem that has to be addressed. But I think the Israelis and the Palestinians could work together. They have already, there is a history of engagement that they can build on. We had the Madrid conference, we had the two Oslo Accords in 1993 and 1995. We have a Palestinian Authority. We have all the elements of a state, but it needs to be allowed to emerge as an independent state, the Palestinian state. But that needs the help of the international community. They will not be able to do it on their own. So the international community has to help in getting the two parties closer together and on agreeing to the two-state solution with the terms that the international community, more or less, there's no difference on how should that solution look like. There's not much difference. It's a convergent view among various countries in the world and various organizations. And if you look at the statement of the UN Secretary General on the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinians, there is frustration with the lack of progress in that regard. But this issue is not impossible to resolve. If it is resolved, it will help in stabilizing the whole Middle East. And the Palestinians and the Israelis have every chance to work together and to integrate economically, and to it will be a very mutually beneficial relations if a Palestinian state is allowed to emerge, a viable, contiguous Palestinian state, the rights of return resolved, Jerusalem is resolved, then we have every opportunity to work together in this part of the world. And in Egypt, we celebrated the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinians, with the Palestinian people 2 days ago, and the Palestinian Foreign Minister was in Cairo. So we are committed to supporting the aspirations of the Palestinian people, the rightful and the legal aspirations of the Palestinian people to have their independent, sovereign state, viable, contiguous, with recognized borders, living side by side in peace with Israel on only 22% of the land of historic Palestine.
All right. Thank you very much, Ambassador, for that contribution. We'll move straight in the last 15 minutes or so to questions. And while people are thinking up their questions, I might keep the ball going just by asking, the world is a multi-changing place right at the moment, a lot of issues from pandemics to geopolitical tensions, and things like the Abraham Accords. Could I get comments from our speakers about what impact those things are having on the search for a viable and long-term settlement between Palestine and Israel?
Yeah. Yes, I think every country has the sovereign right of entering into the agreements that they wish to enter into with other countries. But I cannot speak on behalf of other countries, but I can say that the long-standing position of Egypt and of all Arab countries and of the Arab League is still the Arab Peace Initiative. And there's no country which signed the Abrahamic Accord which would have a different view about establishing a two-state solution, establishing a Palestinian state within the two-state solution. They all would agree. They all still committed to the two-state solution. They're all supporting the aspirations of the Palestinian people. It's just the approach is different. It's just like trying to show Israel the fruits of having normal relations with other countries in the region. All the countries which signed the Abrahamic Accords were represented on Tuesday in Parliament House in the event of the International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. Some people have several arguments regarding how this would affect the two-state solution, but these countries are still committed to the two-state solution and to the aspirations of the Palestinian people, and it's in the very best interest of Israel to have normal relations with the government, all the countries of the area, and all the people of the area, is to have this issue resolved. This is going to help Israel have normal relations with the countries and the peoples in the region.
All right. Any other comments, gentlemen? Not necessary, if you're not. All right. Now, could I ask for other comments from the floor at this stage? And if you could identify yourself when you ask your question and let us know who you're directing the question to. Thanks, Ernst.
Please wait for the microphone before you start speaking. Thank you.
Thank you, all three of you, for your presentations. My name is Ernst Wilhelm. I'm a member of the ACT branch. At our branch AGM very recently, there was a lot of support for gender parity in our panels. You are all men. So my first question to each of you is, does each of your countries have women heads of mission in other countries? But coming to the substance of today's topic, Israel has Arab members of the parliament, there's an Arab on the Supreme Court, and there are Arabs in the army, including at officer level. Some Palestinian leaders have been reported as saying there will never be any Israelis in a Palestinian state. So my question is, does that remain the Palestinian position?
Can you repeat again, sir?
Some Palestinian leaders have said that there will never be any Israelis in a Palestinian state. The question is whether that remains the Palestinian position.
Thank you very much. I'll start by the last question. Actually, maybe I forgot to mention that one of our own also compromises is to accept the settlers in Palestine as Palestinian people, because we are interested in a multi-faith, multicultural country. We're not interested in only one big country. So, and this is also a declared proposal. If they agree to become like Palestinians, Jewish community in Palestine, this will be great. And this is not just sort of assumption, because we have a Palestinian community in Israel. So we have 2 million there, also Muslims and Christians. So I think this is our own position. If they agree to have a Palestinian passport, Palestinian nationality, they're becoming Palestinians. We don't have any problem. Yeah.
Can I answer the gender issue?
Yeah, gender issue.
Yeah. Yes. As far as the Egyptian Ministry of Foreign Affairs is concerned, there is an entry exam, which starts with a written exam, and that written exam, the applicants are anonymous. And the fact is that in the newer in the last few years, the percentage of women has been increasing, and it's almost close to parity now. in the new generations. But as far as heads of missions are concerned, it's also still high compared to other diplomatic services. I think it's about around 20%, which is high compared to other diplomatic services in general around the world. But it's on the increase. The new generations, we have more women than we used to have with the older generations, because it's a career that is based on, I mean, all our ambassadorial appointments are from our career diplomats. So this will reflect on our heads of missions in the coming years. We will see more women, but now it's about, I think it's about 20%, but there's no policy there's no gender policy in appointments. It's just based on it's competitive based on their performance in the exec. But as far as politicians are concerned, as far as the political, our lawmakers now, we have a percentage of lawmakers that is unprecedented in our country's history. In the lower house, it's about 25%. In the upper house, it's 10%. And this is unprecedented in our, we never had these numbers before. But the trend is towards a more gender equal, particularly with political posts. And I would like to invite you to visit the Egyptian human rights strategy, which is a very ambitious strategy over 5 years. The area of women and the religious freedoms has always been praised as a successful area in our human rights strategy.
Thank you.
Regarding Kuwait, of course, we have diplomats, women, and we have ministers. We have MPs in the parliament as women, and they are always shoulder to shoulder with men in Kuwait. I don't have to say anything more about that, because you can go through the media and you see how they are active, whether in diplomacy or in the ministry and their secretaries. And
thank you, Ambassador. So, yes, please.
My name is Maya Kayali. I'm Australian and from Palestinian origin. I'd like to make a comment first, and
if you could keep it relatively brief, thank you. Yeah, by all means, but we are running short of time. Thank you. Yeah,
the comments are two.
Yeah.
Number one, Mr. Abdulhadi, Ambassador of Palestine, in the explanation, the details that you have given, you used the terms "we have." So you said we have 20%, we have 60 or 8%, etc. And you showed the picture, which shows the green color, which is traditionally or historically Palestine shrunk into a small 8%. Actually, you don't have anything, because the whole area and the population is under occupation. So I have my own concern with the use of that term "we have," because you don't have anything. So that's my remark. The second is, if I may make just a little comment about women in the Middle East and their participation in the democratic process. My own, having come from that region, my own perception is that there is political will in those countries to involve women. Definitely in all those countries, the systems and the governments have been keen to encourage women to study, to enter the workforce. There's a keenness on introducing equality, but the culture is still holding people back. And under culture, I think I need to give a lecture to explain what the culture is and what the obstacles and the hindrances are. Now, these are my two remarks. Can I ask a question?
Briefly, please. Thank you.
Now, to think about conflicts between countries, I think everyone agrees that the guiding principles to solving conflicts are three. Number one, international law. Number two, human rights. And number three, the peace, the calling for peace, which across the globe, everyone wants to see prevail, everywhere. The latest war in Ukraine showed that the world believe in those three principles, there was anger, including in Australia, of course, rightly so. The whole world does not agree to the invasion of Ukraine, and the whole world is calling for international law to prevail, human rights, and then calling for peace. Why aren't these three principles not enough to solve the issue in Palestine? And given that this is an institute for Australian international affairs, why is it that Australia, who's a big believer in those three guiding principles, have governments which fluctuate? So you see one government who definitely is more pro-peace and rational about, suggesting a solution, and then another government coming back, later, which changes the policy. And the clear example is actually Jerusalem. So the previous government recognized Jerusalem as Israel capital. The new government returned, that and changed their mind. Why aren't those international law, the human rights, and the call for peace aren't enough to allow Australia as a government to have a consistent policy regardless of who is in government?
All right, thank you for that. In terms of the Australian government's policy, of course, we're not here to discuss that today. And I suggest that you do, in fact, talk to representatives of the Australian government. We're here providing a platform for the views that our ambassador speakers are presenting today. Now, Ambassador Zayed would like to make a response to the first part of your question.
Yeah, I think the Labour government actually reinstated Australia's previous position. So that's the long-standing position about. Does that relevant to your question? The Labour government and the Prime Minister actually reinstated the long-standing Australian position on Palestine.
Bipartisan one.
Yeah, the bipartisan one. Regarding women, I thank you for the comment. Yes, the culture needs to be also, we have to do a lot of education and capacity building regarding women. But the trend around the Arab world, as you mentioned, is towards openness and towards women inclusion. That's not only in Egypt and Kuwait, it's around the Arab world. This is in Saudi Arabia, for instance. So this is an area where the Arab world is making good progress. But as you mentioned, yes, and in our Egyptian human rights strategy, there is a lot of capacity building work that we are going to do also to tackle this issue. And we hopefully will see in the coming years better women rights.
Sorry, John, we've got time for two more questions. If you could ask one very briefly.
Just one word comment. My name is John Moses, which would originally be Muslim. So I am of Arab descent.
Oh, good.
My point is to observe that
gentleman here
Israeli policy is based, coming from the good part. I recognize that there are Israeli liberals who disagree with this policy, but this policy is actually a kind of Old Testament religious fundamentalist. They will not change this attitude that the Almighty God has bestowed this land of promised land for eternity, and not come up to date with the fact that there are things changed in the last 1,000 years. That's all I want to say.
All right, thanks, John. Now, Des, if you could be brief as well.
Indeed, Desmond Woods, I'm a ACT branch councillor. I'm old enough to remember the era of Izzat and the optimism of those years. And I can't help but reflect on the fact that one of the many causes for the drift towards right-wing extremism in the Knesset, which you mentioned, is, of course, the Iranian Revolution. And the reality, which is that though many other Arab states have a view that there can be a two-state solution, the Iranian point of view since the time of the revolution is that Israel must cease to exist. That existential rhetoric, in my view, continues to fuel the drift towards the right, because it leaves very little room for the moderates within the Israeli general public and Knesset, and that this is undermining the opportunities for Israel to address this matter in the way we would all wish it to. your views.
Who would like to
I understand you are
respond
saying
first?
that the Iranian not recognizing Israel.
Not
But Iranian is not an Arab word. Iranian is Persia. Arab word is the Arab League, the Arab countries. And we have nothing to do with Iran.
I'm aware of that, but I'm asking for your opinion on the Iranian position with regard to Israel's
If we are speaking about two states, then we are recognizing the other party. So saying that,
publicly recognized.
and so what comes from the Iranian regime has nothing to do with what we think and how we think towards our issue of Palestine and Israel. So I think.
I think the Iranians have a very unique position on. They have I mean, I cannot speak for them, but they have, I think, a view about a one, democratic state, like a one-state solution with everyone, something like that. But regardless of that position, I think the more important position is that of the Palestinians themselves. I mean, Iran does not have borders with Israel and has never been part of the Arab-Israeli conflict. So regardless of the position of the government of the day in Iran, what matters is the position of the Palestinians themselves and the Arab countries, including the countries which are still technically in a state of conflict with Israel, or the countries which have resolved their conflicts and now in a state of peace with Israel. This is more important.
They don't have borders, but they do fuel and fund Hezbollah within borders.
I think if we empower the moderates, then I mean, if Israel is willing to engage in the in negotiations leading to the two-state solutions, which by and large most of the international community accepts, the extremist parts will be weakened. We will be empowering the moderates. I mean,
if I support this argument, I think it's just if there is a peace agreement between Palestinians and Israelis, and as His Excellency mentioned, that support the moderate side within Palestine, whatever, this will reduce effectively any negative impact of any other country, including Iran, on Israel. So I think the only way for Israel to guarantee its security is a peace with Palestinians. This is because Palestine still is central to all Arab world, even, I mean, it's a global issue. So I think if they are wise enough, and also they don't want to create this kind of hard, far right wing in Israel, they need to sign an agreement with the Palestinians. And just, I mean, to support the two-state solution. We're not asking like the partition resolution, 50% of Israel or whatever. It's just, I mean, 22% of Palestine. So the only effective, successful strategy is a peace strategy with Palestinians. Otherwise, extremists from both sides will be strengthened. And I think this is the best strategy to adopt by Israelis.
And this will guide us to have this conflict with the Israelis and interference of the Iranians in such a situation like that. And I don't think Iran is concerned about the situation in Palestine as much as the neighboring countries.
Last words.
We are the neighboring countries. I'm not a neighboring country. They are the neighboring countries. They feel it more than us, but we do support the peace process.
All right, last word to Ambassador Zayed.
Yes, this is on the as the international community is celebrating International Day of Solidarity with the Palestinian people. I want to go back 10 years ago in 2012, when there was a vote in the UN on elevating the status of Palestine to a non-member observer state in the United Nations. The government of Australia at that time was Labour and abstained, but they didn't refuse. I mean, they just abstained. The government of New Zealand, I was in New Zealand at that time, and they supported the resolution. So there is a kind of conversion on the importance of leaving a Palestinian state to emerge. Even the countries which actually rejected the idea are not rejecting the idea of an independent Palestinian state. So, but most countries of the world actually supported the resolution, and that is why it was passed. And some countries abstained, and very few countries actually rejected the elevation of the status of Palestine in the UN.
It's for the time being more than 140 countries recognized state of Palestine.
Yes.
Fully recognized state of Palestine. Palestine upgraded the observer non-member state. And in 2019, actually, Palestine lead the Group 77 and China within a program called Enabling Program. So they were, the chair of this group for 1 year. This was an initiative by international community to support the capacity and capability of Palestinian state or future Palestinian state. So there are a lot, of course, as His Excellency mentioned, attempts to enable and support Palestine to become a state. Let me mention.
Well, just very quickly, time is running.
Because there is an argument about if Palestine is a state or not. Because now in Australia we have this discussion. It's they use like technical criteria for the recognition of state of Palestine. But according to Montevideo agreement, which put the criteria for a state. So it was 4 criteria. One, we have defined border 1967. We are engaged in the international relations and signed agreements. And we have people, because this is one of the other criteria, and we have functioning government. So these are the 4 criteria elements that support Palestine as a state. So even if we want to go to the technical definition of Palestine, this is there. So it's not just, self-determination as an abstract concept, but it's also, we responded, response to the criteria of Montevideo about definition of the state.
Thanks very much to all our speakers. Unfortunately, time has got away from us. And it's clear that this is an issue that is a mainspring of Middle East stability and peace. It has been with us for a long time, and it looks like it will still be around for some time to come. I'll just make a couple of comments on the issue of gender parity that was discussed. We did hope that our colleague from the Moroccan embassy, the ambassador of Morocco, Her Excellency could join us, but unfortunately she was unavailable tonight. And I'd also point out that the branch will be.
She's overseas.
She's overseas, so she couldn't join us. She wanted to. I also want to point out that the branch will be approaching the ambassador of Israel for him to come and present views early in the new year. So without any further ado, let me, on behalf of the branch, thank our speakers for coming, and hopefully we can see you in the future at other events.
Thank you very much.